Okay guys, now I'm just going to have a quick recap of the lists now as well. When I was walking around there too, I noticed that some people were putting things outside of the body section. Remember, like I was saying, all of the content of the page happens inside in the body section. So that's after the begin body tag and before the slash body tag. Putting content in the head section is wrong. Putting content between the head and the body is wrong, and putting content after the body is wrong as well. Now, of course, as we're used to at this stage, the browsers have a lash at displaying it and probably do a very good job, but it's just way wrong. Okay. Now we're going to look. I'm going to quickly recap the lists again now. Okay. So for an ordered list, you begin with an OL for an ordered list, and you'll end with /OL to end the ordered list. You'll notice here that where we have New York, London, Paris, and Munich, there are no numbers in there. The browser puts in the numbers as part of its displaying an ordered list. And it gives the first one the first number, the second one the second number, the third one the third number. Typically that's 1, 2, 3, 4. It may be A, B, C, D, maybe Japanese, Chinese, whatever. Now, this is an important point which I didn't make previously. So your ordered list is a big box, and inside that then there are all these LI boxes, and inside those then you have the content of the list. Okay? You'll notice that there's nothing in the space between the boxes. Like you have your ordered list, then you begin your list item, then you have New York, then /LI to end the New York list item, and then immediately, straight away, you're heading into the next LI for London, and then /LI. There's no scope for putting stuff between the LIs. Like what are they? They don't fit into the structure then. So you have an ordered list is a big box. Inside that you have boxes of LIs, and inside those you have the content. And that's the only place the content in a list can be. Also, which kind of follows on from what we were saying in the lecture this morning, you don't really get then to style what the list looks like or to format it. So you really shouldn't have any BRs in your list, for example, any BR slashes. You certainly wouldn't want to be having bolds or italics in there. You're specifying an ordered list with this many items. These are the items. Now, Mr. Browserman, go do your thing. Okay? So that was a point that I really hadn't made properly before. Now, we're going to look now, well, it's an unordered list. We're going to look now at a definition list, which we haven't seen before. And this is ideal for definition type scenarios. Where it was devised, for dictionary type scenarios or for a manual, computer manual type thing where you look up that and then that explains it there. So you can start a definition list with a DL for definition list. It would make so much more sense for that projector to be there, wouldn't it? Or does it the same thing? No, it's impossible to see that screen from there, really. I suppose it would be just as bad, wouldn't it? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I digress. So, if it's you start with DL for definition list, and then you have DT, which I like to think stands for the definition term. We're saying espresso, then /DT to end that. And then the definition then is inside in a DD. So it's strong black coffee made by forcing steam through ground coffee beans /DD. Okay. Now I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe that for one DT, you can have many DDs after that. So a word may have multiple definitions, for example, and you might give each one its own thing. So that's another list that's available to you. And again, the browser then goes away and does that. You're specifying the structure. You're saying this is a definition list. This is the definition term. This is the definition of that term. Now go do whatever it is you do with that. You wouldn't want to be putting bolds and italics and colors in there either. Okay? So I'm making great inroads into my to-do list. No. Let's have a look here now at this image tag. So for an image tag, you have your IMG, src equals, and then in here you would have the location of the image file. If you just say the name of the image, solder.jpg, it'll look for that solder.jpg wherever this page was. Alternatively, you can specify the full path. You can say http:// blah 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 slash solder.jpg. Yeah?
If it's in another folder, you just put a slash.
If it's in another folder, you can specify the address absolutely, http:// wherever it is on the web, or you can specify it relative to where you are. Now, if you say nothing, if you just say the name, that's saying, well, it's where I am. Some people like to gather up, if they have lots of them, gather up all their images and put them in a folder called images in the same folder as the HTML. In that scenario, then you'd be looking at it for in images/soldier.jpg. It's also possible to say, I want you to go up 2 levels of the directory and then down into this folder, down into this folder, and down into this folder, soldier.jpg. So if you're mad enough, you can do that. The relative addressing can be as fancy as you like. But you don't want to make your life too complicated either. Okay? The alt must be there for it to be correct. So alt would hold a description of what the image is. That's useful for a number of reasons. The most important reason we have it now is for people who don't see very well, and they might be using some technology to read the screen. Obviously, the technology won't be able to recognize the contents of the picture and explain what it is, but at least it'll be able to tell them what the alt tag is, what the HTML programmer, said about it in the alt tag. And then you have the width and the height. You must also have the width and the height for it to be correct. The obvious width and height are the actual width and height of the image. Okay? If you use different values here, the browser will display the image with these new values. So if you have an image that's 100 pixels by 100 pixels, and you say to the browser, I want you to display it 150 pixels wide and 70 pixels high, that's how it'll appear on the screen, 100 by 150 by 70. Now, that's actually fine. However, if you find that the values you are putting in for the images are very different from the natural image of the image size, then you may be pushing the boat out a bit. If you take an image that's 50 pixels by 50 pixels and you display it at 500 pixels by 500 pixels, it's going to look crap. Okay? So if you find yourself doing that, maybe you need to go find a different image. I mean, if you need an image that's 500 pixels by 500 pixels, you wouldn't want to be stretching a 50 pixel by 50 pixel image to achieve that. Doing things the other way around is also a bad idea. If you have an image that's 500 pixels by 500 pixels and you display it at 50 pixels by 50 pixels, well, it'll look fine. But every time someone loads that web page, they're downloading an image that's roughly 100 times bigger than it needs to be. It has 100 times more an image that's 500 pixels by 500 pixels isn't 10 times bigger than one that's 50 by 50. It's 100 times bigger, because it's 10 times bigger that way and 10 times bigger that way. So you're making someone download an image that's 100 times bigger, roughly, than you actually need. That might not be such a big deal for them, might happen to them once a day. But that's happening to you as the web page developer every single time someone goes to the page. If your hosting plan makes you pay per megabyte, you might end up paying roughly 100 times more than you need to be. So if someone downloads the page and it takes it 1 second longer to download than it would otherwise, that's no big deal for them. If you're paying 100 times more than you need to be, that is a big deal. So you can display the image at any size that you want, but if you're stretching it too much, it'll look bad, and if you're shrinking it too much, you're wasting money, really. So stretching it a little bit either way, to fit the format of the page is fine, but if you're pushing it too much, maybe you need to go make a new image or get a new image from somewhere else. Okay? Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the handout I gave you there today. And that's not it. These are HTML entities. So I may have mentioned, I certainly should have mentioned, that web pages are coded in bog standard ASCII, which is American Standard Code for Information Interchange. Long time ago, different computer systems had different methods for representing characters, and decided we need a standard so they can talk to each other. Unfortunately, the people sitting around the table deciding what machines needed to talk to each other were totally focused on the English-speaking world, and this left us with a standard which didn't deal with non-English characters very well. So you might find if you get a text message from someone in France, or rather a text message in French, that the characters with the fathers, as we might call them in Ireland, with the accents, might come out funny. Sometimes you get a garbled text message, and bits of it are garbled if it's in a foreign language. There was a bit of a controversy recently because some Irish language schools found that when they were sending texts to parents, because they had included non-standard characters, because obviously they were, if you're a Gael school, you're sending your text message with all your fathers in the right place, that it was actually costing them more. It was taking 2 messages per message. It was taking 2 of their total. So it was costing them twice as much. So there are issues there around that. But basically, ASCII didn't deal with foreign characters. Like an E-FADA, as we would call it, is a different character as far as computers are concerned from E. Do you mean? It has a different value, different numeric value stored in the system. And there wasn't a lot of standardization beyond the English language characters. So if you have like ESP A, Enya A is España. If you don't have that squiggle over the N, it's just España, which is not the same word at all. So Spanish people would consider N and N with a squiggle over it as 2 separate letters. So your A, B, C, D, E, F, G in Spanish, will have N and Enya, right? Similarly, you'll need to know how to do that, say, for Dunleary. There's no English spelling of Dunleary. People say the words Dunleary, but it's always written, whatever it is, Dunleary. Don't ask me how to spell Dunleary now, but it's D-U-FADA. Okay? So you may need those for certain things. So even if you're not doing stuff in foreign language, if you're going to make a web page about a Dunleary, you should probably be able to actually spell it right. You may notice it too if you're sending text messages to Poland or something. If you're getting a text message from Poland, some of the characters might not turn up. Now, you see, this was fine when computer systems were largely only communicating with a few other computer systems in the same country. So like people sending messages in France from one system to another was fine. It's only when the internet came along, all of a sudden, text was going from French computers to Spanish computers to, German computers. And what wasn't a big deal before suddenly became a big deal because things weren't displaying right. So for the special characters, we have to code them in a special way in HTML. So let's look at, now this is only a small selection here just to give you an idea of how it works. So let's look there at E-fada, as the Irish people would call it, or the acute E, as everyone else might call it. Okay? So if you want to say Tá me go maith, right? You would have T, and then you would have to say it right now, Colin. Ampersand A acute semicolon for the A-fada. Space M, and then for the E-fada you would have to say ampersand E acute semicolon. Goma then after that. So that's how you do fadas in HTML. Now you might say, well actually I already know how to do a fada on the keyboard. I just do ting, 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 and out comes the fada. And that's grand, and that'll work here, and it'll probably work everywhere in Ireland. But if you put that on a web page and someone looks at it in Tel Aviv, it might not work unless you have unless you've done it the right way, the standard way. So you notice on the list I gave you with the nested lists, there was actually Champs-Élysées there with the accent over the E. It was an uppercase E acute. And also, of course, if you want an ampersand, then you have to actually say ampersand amp semicolon. So elephant and castle, you would also be required to use a special code there. Now you can use these numerical values if you want, but there's kind of friendly codes as well to make them easier to remember. For some things, there may only be the numerical value. So if it's an uppercase A grav you want, for example, you'll say ampersand uppercase A. You see that one there? So that's how they work. So you have the C cedilla there, you have your umlaut, your enya. I didn't put in any, I know Portuguese speakers in the class, no? I didn't put in any of the Portuguese markers, you know, for your coração and that, but they're all there, you can look them up. Okay? Any Polish speakers in the class? I actually thought this one here was an I with a line through it, but it's an L with the line through it. And the different sounds there. So if you speak Polish, or if you're writing stuff in Polish, you may need that. And let's face it, I mean, if you get a job as a HTML coder in Ireland, the chances of you being called upon to produce text in Polish are very, very high. Do you know? I mean, who's going to make a website in Ireland now and not have the Polish version, you know? So, I mean, you don't want to be fiddling around with the keyboard, you know, looking to know how you do. I mean, to us, a Z with a dot without a dot, you know, it's still just a Z like, you know? But that could have a big difference for the meaning and stuff. There's fractions there as well, but mostly once you just get the idea of getting the accents, okay? Also, if you want to force a space, it's NBSP, ampersand NBSP. If you do space, 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 if you do like, if you want to say like, I'm so tired, and you want to do like S space, 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 O, space, 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 O, right? Multiple spaces in HTML will only be displayed as one space. If you want to force 3 spaces, you'd have to do ampersand NBSP semicolon, ampersand NBSP semicolon, ampersand NBSP semicolon. Okay. So any questions on that? So I'd like you to know is I'd like you to include some Irish or Polish or Spanish, if the mood takes you, on your web page, just to see how that works. And also you're going to code the lists there that we did in the class, if you haven't that done already. And then in the next class, if I have everything straight in my head, we're going to look at tables. Okay? Any questions on any of that? No? Yes, sir. Did you not get one already?
No,
I went in the class. I gave out all the printouts I had, and I believed I had spares, but they never came back. So I don't have any more. It'll be on the. I'll put it on the web anyway, and you can download it. You know. You can also just Google it as well for a full list. You know, there's one there. Okay. Oh, you mean now the nested list, or do you mean this thing here? Yeah, I don't have any more of those.